Hello, sisters and brothers. Our devotional for today, for July 18, is a reflection on My Utmost for His Highest, a series of devotionals written and compiled by Oswald Chambers. You can always find a link for the daily devotional at utmost.org. And for today's devotional, we'll turn to Acts 9. I'll read a few verses from this chapter, and this is the chapter that describes the conversion of Saul to Paul. So we know many of our New Testament letters were written by Paul, but of course his name was first Saul. So I'm going to read verses 3 through 6 of Acts chapter 9. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting," he replied. "Now get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do." And Chambers titles this devotional for today, "The Mystery of Believing," focusing on that question in verse 5. He said, "Who are you, Lord?" Through the miracle of redemption, Saul of Tarsus was instantly changed from a strong-willed and forceful Pharisee into a humble and devoted bondservant of the Lord Jesus. There is nothing miraculous or mysterious about the things we can explain. We control what we are able to explain. Consequently, it is only natural to seek an explanation for everything. It is not natural to obey, yet it is not necessarily sinful to disobey. There can be no real disobedience nor any moral virtue in obedience unless a person recognizes the higher authority of the one giving the orders. If this recognition does not exist, even the one giving the orders may view the other person's disobedience as freedom. If one rules another by saying, "You must do this and you will do that," he breaks the human spirit, making it unfit for God. A person is simply a slave for obeying unless behind his obedience is the recognition of a holy God. Many people begin coming to God once they stop being religious, because there is only one master of the human heart, Jesus Christ, not religion. But woe is me if after seeing him, I still will not obey. Isaiah 6 verse 5 and also verse 1. Jesus will never insist that I obey, but if I don't, I have already begun to sign the death certificate of the Son of God in my soul. When I stand face to face with Jesus Christ and say, "I will not obey," he will never insist. But when I do this, I am backing away from the recreating power of his redemption. It makes no difference to God's grace what an abomination I am, if I will only come to the light. But woe is me if I refuse to see the light. See John 3, verses 19 through 21. So Chambers titles that devotional "The Mystery of Believing," and he talks about obedience then, and recognizing that our obedience can only truly come from recognizing where our orders or where our rules come from. Who are we to obey? Whose desires are we to obey? Of course, for us as Christians, that's God's. So we cannot become enslaved to someone else's desires. We cannot become enslaved to even the rules and the ordinances of religion. Because if we do, now we're slaves to that, and we're not necessarily allowing ourselves to be obedient to God in that context. So why is he titled it "The Mystery of Believing"? Well, as he pointed out at the beginning of the devotional, we can explain those things that we can control, which means we want to try to explain everything. But faith is a spiritual experience, and we are spiritual beings wrapped up in flesh, wrapped up in a human experience. So where does that come in? Where do we allow our belief to take over and trust in what God is calling us to do, trust in what God has for us, trust in God's direction for our lives? All of that has to come in areas where we can't explain it anymore. And it can become tricky. It can be difficult, especially if we're trying to explain it to someone else, if they don't come from the same faith experience as we do. It can be tricky even trying to explain it to ourselves. Allow your belief to be greater than your unbelief. Allow your belief in God, your trust in God, your faith in God to fill in those areas where you can't explain it. And just allow that to be your experience with God. Thank you as always for listening. Be safe and stay well.